Hi everyone, Bear from Bear Reads Books. Welcome back to my channel, and it's time for me to reveal all of the answers to all of your wonderful questions that you've sent me over the past 4 or 5 days. And thank you very much for all of those questions, submissions. They were very probing and honest and really good. One of the great comments was about, oh, you reveal so much about yourself on camera already. And I went, do I? So that's really nice of you to say. It must mean that I'm comfortable talking to you, I suppose. But let's do the most important question first, and that is about pets. And I got a couple of questions about pets. You see wild animals and not so wild animals in the background of almost all of my videos, but I don't think I've actually ever introduced you to the beasts. So let's do that. The dog is here somewhere. Come on, dog. So the dog, who's just pulled up beside me, her name is Meg. She's a border collie. She's about 6 years old, I think, maybe getting on to 7, and she's just beautiful. So let me show you Meggie. Sit. Hey, sit. Look, Meg. There we go. Where'd you go? Where's the ball? So that's Meg. She'll happily chase that ball all day, every day, until I'm sick of it, until she's a heaving mess of slobber. So that's Meg, the border collie, 6 or 7 years old. She's lovely, very kind and nice. And with just the one dog, we do have a cat. She's not around because I think she gets the impression I don't like her, and that's probably about right. I'm definitely not a cat person. So we do have like a tortoiseshell cat called Trixie that we inherited from my niece when she couldn't take her anymore, and she's been she's a normal cat. She's almost likable, almost. On top of that, you've seen the chickens around about in the background. We don't have names for the chickens, but we have 7 at the moment, a mix of Rhode Island Reds, some Isa Browns, some French Wheaton Marrons, so a few different types of chickens. You'll see them in the background of all of the videos. They pump out eggs all day, every day, so we've got an abundance of eggs in these days of supermarket shortages. We are definitely not short of eggs. What else have we got? We've got a possum. Not a pet, definitely not a pet. It is a wild animal, and I think I've said before, but my wife and I are wildlife carers, especially my wife, who's cared for things like kangaroos, possums, wild birds, injured birds, and right now we don't have any animals in care, but a couple of years ago now we had this particular possum in care who'd lost her mother, and we had her in care in a cage, is how you do it, and in a like a pouch, and you keep them in a pouch and you feed them 4 or 5 times a day and night. You wake up in the middle of the night to do that. So we raised this possum. We named her Liberty, and we released her down the back. Now, we released her down the back of our property because our property is 3/4 of an acre long and thin, going all the way back, and at the back of our property is all bushland. It's all trees and no houses at all. So it was a perfect spot to release her, just on the edge of our property boundary, and so she could go across the fence, grab some food, and come back to the safety of her house. So it's a bit of a jungle down there, so she loves it. And we leave her alone. We give her the occasional piece of fruit when we remember, but generally she fends for herself. And then since we've released her down the back of our property, she's met a man. She's had a baby. And I think the baby's now headed off by itself too. So she's in the box. We've got a possum box, and I've got some footage of the possum box that I'll play for you right now, and you can just see her. She's very shy during the day, so it's a little bit hard to see her clearly, but I've got a little bit of footage for from her. I didn't want to feed her because it's out of her normal feeding cycle during the day. They just usually sleep. So enjoy the footage of Liberty the possum. Liberty, hello. So this is Liberty, everybody. Hello, Liberty. Hello, Liberty. So that's it for pets, and those questions were submitted by Greg from Supposedly Fun and from Brandy, who asked a couple of different questions, some really good ones. So thank you to those guys for submitting some great questions. Next on the list is about my job. I won't give away the exact employer, but I work for a bank, a community bank. So one, not a huge, big global or national bank, but a community bank, a little bank that's trying to compete with the big boys. And as a community bank, they put all of their funds back into the community. So they are a community-owned bank. So when you become a customer, you become a member of that bank, and then certain benefits are afforded to you for being a member of that bank. It's a really nice community feel to the bank if you work there, or if you do your banking through them. And their head office is here in my small city, which is great. So I don't have to live in a capital city. I don't have a huge commute in the morning. So I can live in a lovely big plot of land like this, and 20 minutes away is a city of 120,000 people with the head office of a bank that spans 2 states at the moment. So pretty exciting. I don't speak to customers on a day-to-day basis. I kind of work in the back office kind of project area. My official title is a collaboration platform specialist, which is kind of IT, kind of communications. So I pretty much help people with all of their platform problems, their software problems, with a view to getting teams of people working better together. So now that everyone's working from home, I'm busier than ever because people figure out that they don't know how to use these platforms. So their meetings are terrible, their communications with other people are terrible. So that's where I step in and help them use all these different software platforms to get the best kind of outcome for their team. So that's me. I've only been there since September last year. Before that, I was a federal public servant that used to work for, in the United States, you would call it Social Security. And in Australia we call it the Human Services, or Services Australia, and I worked for them for 16 years, also in projects and learning and development and web design and all sorts of things. So lots of techie stuff, and I think I'm kind of glad in this day and age that I don't work for Social Security. It's not as bad as it is in the United States with 16 million people all applying for Social Security all at once, but it is similar. You've got thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people applying for Social Security all at the same time, which makes it a pretty tough job at the best of times, and an even tougher job now with all of this stuff going on. So that's my job, and I love it. It's been a great change, going from 16 years of the federal public service to a private enterprise. My first ever job in private enterprise. It's a big difference. So that's it. That was asked also by Brandy Gugliotta, and Amelia Reeds as well asked me that same question. So thank you again for those questions. Now, Boopy S, who's been a subscriber for a while and asks lots of questions all the time. She's really great at asking questions and about leaving comments on videos. And Boopy asked, ambitions, do I have ambitions to be a writer, and if so, what genre? And if you've been following along, you would have seen that I'm doing a university course in creative writing at the moment, which is going well, even though now it's shifted to be a fully classroom-led course to a fully online course, which is not really what I signed up for. I really wanted the stability of classes, but they're handling the online classes really well. You have to show up at a certain time. They're not just recordings. They engage you on the video to speak out and to ask questions and answer questions. So they're doing a great job with the online. And yes, I would like to be a writer. I think in the past I just haven't found my rhythm to write as consistently as I should to make it as good as I could. And I guess that's what the course is about. And the course is geared around writing fiction, but also I've just finished writing a full book review. So I took one of the reviews that I did on that I've done here on YouTube, and I think I did Night Boat to Tangier by Kevin Barry. And what you can say to camera is very different when you have the time to plan and write a review on paper. It's very, very different. So that was a good exercise. But definitely fiction would be my choice to write. And to what genre? It would either be that literary genre, or sometimes my writing style doesn't typically lend itself to literary fiction. I'm great at reading literary fiction, but maybe not so great at writing it. But I think mystery is something that I would really like to try and write. You know, a good ripping tale of intrigue and murder, those kinds of stories. That's the sort of stuff I think I'd really enjoy writing. So thank you, Boopy, for that great question. Next we have Judy Brown asked me, have I always read a lot? And backed it up with who do I credit for my love of reading? So both of those from Judy, thank you very much. Have I always read a lot? No, actually. I've gone probably years without picking up a novel or reading deeply or finishing a book, I think. And it's really just been the last couple of years where I decided to recommit. So I used to go through waves of reading. So I might read while I was on vacation, and then it would carry over into life when I got back, and then that would kick me off again. And other times I just didn't read much at all. It was tiring to me, or I was just busy doing other things. But really it was three years ago now that I decided to recommit to my reading, and that was one of the reasons why I decided to make this channel and go on Goodreads and all that sort of stuff. And it was really a determined effort to do something that I love, that I'd kind of let slide for a while. I always kept up reading in bits and pieces, but there was never any determined effort to make it part of my everyday life. But I'd always loved it, no matter whether I was in a hiatus or whether I was deep in 6 books at once. I always loved it when I did it. It was just about prioritising it, which is the same with any goal, really. You've got to prioritise stuff, and if you don't prioritise it, you just don't do it. But I guess my love of reading came from my parents. Both my mother and father were big readers. Mum with Sidney Sheldon and Joan Collins and all of those trashy romance, trashy mystery novels. And my father was kind of like spy novels, as well as Wilbur Smith, Robert Harris, you know, those kinds of exciting seat-of-the-pants type thrillers or big family dramas. And my parents always had a book on the go, but they were readers that would read in the evening in bed before they went to sleep. You wouldn't really see them too much just sitting around the house reading a book. My mum maybe, but not generally. Mostly it was just that half hour to 45 minutes before they went to bed. Or if you were on vacation, then they would just spend the entire vacation on the beach reading books. But it certainly developed a love of books in me, starting right from primary school into secondary school. And why else would you study literature at university, I guess? So thank you very much for that question. That was a great one. Thanks, Judy. And Erica from The Broken Spine asked me the hobby I enjoy outside of reading. So other than reading, what hobbies do I enjoy? I've been hiking now for, I guess, almost a decade. I think in the move to my 40th birthday, I decided to do this big multi-day hike in Tasmania called the Overland Track. It's very hilly, it's lots of snow and mud, and it was fantastic. But that was in the lead up to my 40th birthday, and I found that the training that was required for that I loved to do. And then every single hike I've been on, whether it be a day hike or a multi-day hike or a month hike, like going to Spain, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. As hard as it's been, the challenge is something that I can push myself to do. And hiking is something I'm going to be doing until the day I die, I think. And that's definitely my hobby. I'll duck out of a Saturday morning and go walking just into town when I'm allowed to do that. At the moment, no. But hiking is something that I'll always be doing. So I have a mountain of gear, I have tents and boots and shoes and hiking poles and all sorts of crazy camping and hiking items, and it is something I truly love to do. And nature, when you're out in nature, it is absolutely stunning. You really do appreciate the world we live in, and you don't feel quite so buried in words and books. Your mind opens up, and it is incredible. What made me start this channel? Thanks, Greg, from Supposedly Fun. I started this channel, as I said, I recommitted to reading 3 years ago, and I think I started this channel back in August last year, so coming up on nine months, I suppose. So, and that was part of this recommittal to reading, but I guess I decided to recommit to reading because that 3 years ago, or almost 3 years ago, was when I gave up drinking. So I stopped drinking, and I had this nervous energy that would mean I just had to keep my brain going. I had to keep my brain busy, and I found that recommitting to reading was the best way to do that. It kept my mind off certain things and focused my mind towards other things, and it was very, very useful. And that's turned into an obsession all of its own, but it's a much more healthy one. So that's why I started the channel, really. So that's how I came to start the channel, but why a channel as opposed to just sitting at home reading or posting reviews on Goodreads was, over time, the more you read, the more you need to know about the books that are coming out. And I stumbled across a couple of book review videos on YouTube and thought, these are really good. These are amateurs having a crack at something really, really fun, and I thought I could be part of that. And the community is fantastic. I could see that it was different to other communities in YouTube, that it was more respectful, and it was a lot more fun, and it was a lot more thought-provoking than a lot of other parts of YouTube. And that was right up my alley. All of those things converged for me to make the choice to start a channel, and I love it. So thanks, Greg. My favourite all-time book or author, by Laura Marshall. Laura Marshall, thank you. My favourite all-time book and my favourite all-time author. This is the hardest question, you realise. For someone that reads 60, 70 books a year and constantly deciding and refreshing what is good and what isn't good. Like, even for the BookTube Prize in March, when I read Women Talking last year, it absolutely blew me away. I could have easily said that it was one of the best books that I read in 2019, compared to every other book of the 65 plus books that I read in 2019. And then I read the other books in that pool, and Women Talking wasn't even in my top 3. So it's all about perspective, and that's why it's so hard to pick an all-time favourite. If I had to, absolutely had to, then it would be Voltaire's Candide. It's not a comfort read. It's crazy French satire, but it's just so entertaining. There's nothing deep or meaningful. It's kind of like a ribald romp through the countryside. It really is good. So that would be my go-to read. I've read it a couple of times. I do recommend it to people if they're into classics. If people aren't into classics, that's not the sort of thing I recommend. Favourite all-time author, I couldn't really say Voltaire for that, but favourite all-time book, I would say Candide. But favourite all-time author is really difficult. I could say Donna Tartt, but 3 books in 25 years, maybe that's not good enough. Sorry, Donna. 3 books in 25 years, I really need to get to know her better. So I do really like Donna Tartt's books. But I think I would have to say anything by John Steinbeck, who's my favourite author, John Steinbeck. And I've mentioned this on my channel before, that back in 2013, for whatever reason, I can't even remember, I decided to do an entire year of John Steinbeck. There's 26, 28 books in his entire back catalogue, and I decided to read them chronologically and spend the whole year doing that. And in 2013, 2014, that took up a whole year. I wasn't reading 60 books a year. 26 books was a big commitment. So I read all of John Steinbeck's and nothing else. And it was such a fantastic year. And I am still completely in love with John Steinbeck's books and his storytelling ability, his characters, and just the immersiveness of the stories that he tells. I think Steinbeck's an absolute marvel. And I would still say Steinbeck is my all-time favourite author. Again, I couldn't pick a favourite book out of the lot. Maybe Grapes of Wrath, maybe. But there are other really fringe ones that people had never heard of that absolutely blew me away. And it's reading a whole author's works in a year is not something I recommend to everybody, but I do recommend it. It's quite amazing. If you wanted to, I have heard of people taking breaks from, reading prize fiction or reading a certain type of book. So I took a break from everything and picked one author, and it was so rewarding. And it still reaps rewards even today, because I look back on it and think, wow, and I still remember great things that I just uncovered during that year of Steinbeck. You could do it with a lot of different authors, I guess. So thank you, Laura, for those two questions, favourite all-time book and favourite all-time author. Erica, again from The Broken Spine, the book that impacted me the most. Book that impacted me the most. I don't know. Oh yeah, I have. And I've mentioned it, I think I've mentioned it on this channel once before. A couple, but Bobby Ann Mason's In Country, which is a very little known book, and I've never heard it mentioned on BookTube at all. I read it so many years ago, and it was so emotionally charged, and it really affected me emotionally. It was such a great book. Bobby Ann Mason's In Country, about people returning from the Vietnam War and the things they faced, the hardships and the emotional roller coaster they were going through, and the acceptance or not acceptance from the rest of the country when they returned from Vietnam. It was great. Bobby Ann Mason's In Country. Off the top of my head, I emotionally connect with so many books, but the one that I remember a lot is that one. The book I constantly recommend. A lot of my friends don't read the same as I do. Or don't read at all. I've found myself recently recommending some great Australian books in non-fiction. Dark Emu, which I think I've mentioned before. I've recommended that to a lot of people. And in fiction, some recent Australian books like Tara June Winch's The Yield, and I tend to recommend stuff that I've just finished, and then I'll just tell everyone. I was the same with The Dutch House. It was the same with The Dutch House by Anne Patchett. I loved it so much I told everyone, you have to read The Dutch House by Anne Patchett. So I'm pretty immediate with my recommendations. There's not a single book from my entire reading history that I continually recommend to people. No, but it's usually recent. And the last question from Brandy, and this is a really insightful question, is in this time that we're going through now, with all the stuff that's happening, do I have a comfort book that I'm reading at the moment, or do I revert to comfort reading at the moment? And Brandy says that she's finding it difficult to get into anything new at the moment, but she's rereading old favourites. And it's such a great question. I'm not a big one for rereading. There's a few books that I've read a couple of times, but there's not one book that I always go back to at different periods. So, but I'm definitely thinking more carefully about the books that I pick up and choose to read right now. In fact, I set aside Ducks Newburyport because it was just too challenging for right now. I was halfway through Vladimir Nabokov's Lolita, and I've set that aside for now because the subject matter is really not something I want to engage with at this time. But I am still reading things that are not, I'm not reading light and fluffy books. I'm not just choosing light and fluffy. I'm still choosing books. At the moment I'm reading for the non-fiction group a book about Parkland, the Parkland shooting, which is altogether confronting. But it is about hope. It is about these kids rising up and creating a movement from something horrible. And for that, it is an uplifting book. But yes, I'm trying desperately not to overtax myself with my reading right now by either choosing too many books or choosing books where the subject matter is confronting. And I think that's a wise decision right now. You don't want something as beautiful and as pure as reading a book, something that gives you amazing joy. You don't want that to be the thing that stresses you out in this time of coronavirus and isolation. You want books to be your refuge. You want books to make you feel wonderful. You want books to be the thing that cheers you up when you've had a crappy day. So being very careful about the choices you make in what you read, I think right now is really, really important. And so is that question. That's a great question. And that was it for questions. Thank you to everyone that submitted a question. My videos rambled on for a while. I hope you don't mind, but if you have any more questions, please post them below and I'll answer them at some point. But thank you again to all of my incredible subscribers. Please keep watching and listening and posting and having discussions with me. I love it. And I'll try and be better at answering your questions and commenting on your comments down below the videos, because sometimes I lose sight of that as well. Thank you once again. Enjoy your day wherever you may be. Have a great Easter and stay safe, everyone. Bye.